All right. Hello, hello, hello. Just sending out a tweet real quick. There we go. And let us start off. Let me just get this set up quickly. There we go. Share. And we're going to share that. All right. So, welcome. We are going to be talking about. Oh, let me move my mic. I forgot to do that. There. Sound might be a little bit better now. Okay. So it looks like I think that people can see the article on the screen. If that's true, please let me know. I just want to make sure it is showing up. But I think it is. All right. So let me just rearrange my screens here so I can keep track of the chat and also see the article at the same time. Hello, Mark. Welcome. You can see the image from the article. Okay, great. Perfect. All right, so before we get into the article, a little background real quick for anyone that doesn't know who's going to be watching this later, and would be surprised if anyone doesn't know, but the website magazine Wired wrote a article about Brandon Sanderson, and there is a lot of issues with the article. So Twitter kind of blew up with outrage, and I read the article very early this morning before I went to sleep, and it really, really angered me, but I thought I'd be okay with it. Just I read it, and now I'm just going to go to sleep and forget about it. But when I woke back up, there was a ton more visibility, I guess. Everyone was sharing it, talking about it, and it just kind of stoked the fire again, I guess you could say. So I figured, let's talk about it. A fictional escapist. Hello, Chris. Welcome. Well, evening for you. Yes. Right now, it is 8 o'clock at night for me, which is kind of a weird time for me to see you, because usually you're on the screen and I'm in the chat, and it's like 6 in the morning for me. All right, so before we talk about the article itself, I want to give a little bit of quick background about Brandon Sanderson for me, and so that people know where I'm coming from, because I think that's fair for everyone to know how I feel about Brandon Sanderson. So I've read the Stormlight Archive, Mistborn, and I've read a couple of the standalones. I think Warbreaker and Elantris are the two that I can remember. And Mistborn was just the first 3 books. I have not gone into the new era. I tried it. It wasn't really my thing. Maybe one day I'll go back in. So I've read a decent amount of Sanderson. My opinion lately on Sanderson has been a bit more negative than perhaps it used to be. And I'm not sure if that's me changing as a reader, or perhaps it's because the last 2 Stormlight Archive books really disappointed me, and so that's kind of soured my opinion. And a lot of Sanderson books I read, it was a long time ago, so it's hard for me to know if it's just my dislike of the last 2 books of the Stormlight Archive, or if I've just changed what I like. But either way, disregarding the fact that I dislike those 2 books that I read last, I really enjoyed the first 2 Stormlight Archive books. I really enjoyed Mistborn when I read it. He's a good writer. I don't have any problems with the guy. He's like the nicest guy. I think everyone can agree he's a super nice dude. And the fact, yeah, see this. Oh, my phone is going off. So let me just move that so it's not like buzzing. I'll just throw it in this chair here. I don't want it to be buzzing on the mic this whole time. So this article proving the bar for journalism really is low these days. Apparently, anyone could do it. Yeah, I think that the article makes, and we'll get into it in a minute, but the article does make some points that it really stresses that Sanderson's a shitty writer. And I think that that's kind of subjective. If that's your opinion, I think, that's okay. You're allowed to think that someone's a bad writer. But the way the article goes about it is insane, just insane. Good evening. Hi, Andrew. Welcome. I'm very glad you're here. And let's get into it. So I used an archived website thing, so I'm not giving them more visibility, I guess. Not that it matters, I don't think, because it's kind of blowing up there. Let me just move the mic out of the way of my chat because that's a little obtrusive. Okay. Sorry if you guys heard any thumping or anything. It's 100% subjective. Yes, I agree. Writing is always going to be subjective, but and I know that you're not saying this isn't the case, but just for anyone else that's watching or listening, it's fine to be subjective and to absolutely hate something, but then to go in and attack somebody personally, it's just disgusting. And so that's kind of why I'm making this. That's why I'm streaming this and making a video for later, because I just think that people need to talk about it, and people are tweeting about it, but there's only so much you can say in, I forgot how many characters Twitter tweets are, but it's not enough. Thank you, Andrew. The journalist was a dick about the whole thing, in my opinion, Mark. Yes. Yeah. All right. So this article is really big. So let's, and I highlighted stuff that I wanted to kind of read and touch on. So first off, the title is Brandon Sanderson is Your God. I think by itself, the title isn't bad, but when we go through the article, you realize this is not a good title. It's pretty insulting. And you kind of start to see it already in the subheader here. He's the biggest fantasy writer in the world. He's also very Mormon. These things are profoundly related. I don't understand why that's related. I think, every writer has different backgrounds, and they put these backgrounds into the books, or they don't. A lot of people are religious and they don't have religious themes that are directly related to their own religion in the books. I personally, again, another disclaimer, I'm an atheist and I am not super religious. I don't have a lot of knowledge in religion. And I also can respect everyone's religions. I think literally the only religion I struggle to respect or understand or comprehend why it's a thing is, and I'm not sure if it's classified as a religion anymore, but that's Scientology. It's just, it was like, we know when it was created, and it just, to me, is weird that, a science fiction writer wrote something, but I'm not here to really lambast anything. If you want to be a Scientologist, go for it. It's just, I don't understand it. But I also won't attack anyone for it. If Sanderson is a bad writer, may we all be similarly unlucky. I don't think writing quality is 100% subjective, though. There are pillars of strong storytelling for a reason. Yeah, and I think that when people are saying that he's a bad writer, they're talking about his prose, but then he has a lot of, other good stuff, right? People like his world building, his characters, and not everyone wants to read a lyrical like fantasy. I'm one of those people who don't, and so the approachable writing style that Sanderson employs is something that I really enjoy, and I know obviously a lot of people do. He's huge, right? Name a bigger fantasy writer than Sanderson at the moment. I bet you struggle to do so, and I think there's a reason for that. I think the ability to tell a story and to be able to write aren't always the same thing. I agree. Myself, I also sell myself as being someone who sucks at prose, and I I went the more simplistic route because I don't think I'm the best writer. And I think it's a valid strategy because, Sanderson is famous, very successful. New York Times bestselling author, every single book. And the reason for that is because people like it. So obviously, just because he's not like a lyrical writer, doesn't mean that he's less than, I don't know, Tolkien or whoever at this point. Know your strengths and weaknesses. Exactly. And if you don't, then you might be in trouble. But as long as you do, then you're good. So let's continue here. It says the article starts out, and the first thing we do is we talk about how much money he's made. Most years, Brandon Sanderson makes about $10 million. Last year, he made $55 million. This is obviously a lot of money for anyone. For a writer of young adultish, never-ending speed-written fantasy books, it's huge. By Sanderson's estimation, he's the highest-selling author of epic fantasy in the world. On the day of his record-breaking Kickstarter campaign, $42 million of that $55 million, I came to the Wired offices ready to gossip. How'd he do it? Why now? Is Brandon Sanderson even a good writer? Right there, you already know that this article is going to be a piece of shit, right? I came to the Wired offices ready to gossip. And that's all this article is. It is just gossip, gossip, gossip. And we're going to kind of get into it in a minute here. But it's really crazy. And then we end off with, is Brandon Sanderson even a good writer? Which I think the question, if this was like an analysis of whether or not Brandon Sanderson was a good writer, fair question, right? And I think it's okay to analyze someone's writing, and it would be okay to answer this in the article as, no, he's a terrible writer, and this is why. And as long as it's written as a subjective piece, but this reads more like a hit piece, and we'll see in a minute why it's crazy. The fact that Sanderson can do so well with iffy prose is exactly what younger me needed to hear. Beating myself up over prose got in the way of my storytelling for too long. Yeah, so if every single fantasy author out there who succeeded was like a lyrical genius, I wouldn't be writing, right? And so he brought in 50, doesn't mean he made 55 million. Yeah, exactly. That is also true. Because everybody knows that a Kickstarter, you're not making that money. So he brought in $55 million after all the expenses. Also, he used a lot of that money to pay off a bunch of other Kickstarters. So that's another wash right there, right? So all that money that came in, I mean, he probably made, I can only guess and speculate, but like if he only made like $10 million, and the rest of that was costs and paying off Kickstarters and all the other stuff, I mean, I think that could be very fair, right? We don't really know. So, we're just gonna move on here, I guess. I don't even know what to say about the money part. I just don't think it's relevant, especially for the article this dude is writing, but that's okay. I'm not talking about the Kickstarter specifically. I mean, him in general. He's popular for a reason, is my point, in spite of his prose. Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's plenty of writers out there who have what some would call bad writing. I haven't read this book, so I'm not making any claims here. But another big popular book that gets lambasted for terrible writing is well, actually there's two, I think, right? 50 Shades of Grey is one, and then Twilight is the other. And both of these I have not read, so I can't actually give my opinion on them. I'm just saying that you don't have to be the world's best writer to make a ton of money. So he goes on, talks about the Mormon stuff here, and I don't want to get into that too much there because there's more of it here. So, and this is the part that makes more sense, that makes more makes me more angry, I guess. So it says, which makes sense. Sanderson is extremely Mormon. What makes less sense is why there's a hole the size of Utah where the man's literary reputation should be. Is it because he mostly writes fantasy, a so the sob sneer sub-literary genre? but then so do J.K. Rowling, Margaret Atwood, and George R. Martin and their household names. Is it because none of Sanderson's work has been adapted for the screen? Well, he wrote 3 of the Wheel of Time books, and an adaptation of that series came out on Amazon Prime in 2021. Could it be finally because he's a weirdo Mormon? But so are Orson Scott Card, Ender's Game, Glenn A. Larson, the original Battlestar Galactica, and Stephanie Meyer, Twilight. Mormon, I mean. Only Orson Scott Card is also a weirdo. So right there, another nasty attack, right? First, we're insulting his literary reputation, which is bonkers to me because he's one of the most well-known people ever. He's saying, J.K. Rowling, Margaret Atwood, and George R. R. Martin are household names. Who has heard of J.K. Rowling, George R. R. Martin, Margaret Atwood, and does not know the name Brandon Sanderson? I would argue he's right in there with those 3 names, like just as big. Is it because he doesn't have a TV show? Maybe, I guess. But like in the book world, he's enormous. And even people who don't read books, they've heard of him, right? Like, it's crazy. I just can't. I just can't. It's just ridiculous. All right, we got a lot of comments here, so let's we can assume $10 million in tour, maybe $10 million from the Kickstarter. Yeah, I mean, it's totally a guess, and it's not unusual for someone who makes a Kickstarter to actually not even bring in any money. Sometimes they have to supplement it with their own because they misjudged something. I'm sure that's not what happened with Sanderson. A, he made a ton of money, and B, he's done Kickstarters before that were very successful, so he knows what he needs to do to make money, I think. So I don't think that's the case with him, but even so, the money is not, he's not making $55 million. Like him or hate him, he's definitely got something. Yep, totally agree. Thought you were Team Jacob with me. I actually remember in the bookstores when that was a thing, and like the cashiers would wear the shirts and say Team Jacob or whoever the other guy is. See, I'm so out of it. I don't know the teams. The simplest way to look at bad books that made it big is that they gave the market what it needed. Well, and here's the thing. Bad books, when we're talking about bad books, we're talking about books that might not stand up in an English class in college, right? It's not these easily digestible books. They are able to be mass consumed, right? And that's why they reach all these audiences, because the average reader, or the average person rather, their reading level is not on the same level as a lot of like classic literature, I guess. So it's, crazy. The section reporter has a Utah-shaped hole where his ignorance is showing. I agree. And if we're just talking about the geographical location, I wouldn't say that in that specific part that I just read he does it, but you'll see later, actually in the next paragraph, he just insults the location constantly. Watch. So Sanderson, when I eventually meet him in person, makes versions of these excuses plus others for his writerly obscurity. It's kind of fun to talk about until it isn't, and that's when I realized in a panic that I now have a problem. Sanderson is excited to talk about his reputation. He's excited, really, to talk about anything, but none of his self-analysis is, for my purposes, exciting. In fact, at that first dinner over Flopsy Utah Chinese, this being days before I'd meet his extended family and attend his fan convention and take his son to a theme park and cry in his basement, I find Sanderson depressingly, story-killingly lame. So first of all, Flopsy Utah Chinese, kind of an insult. I'm not sure if it's an insult to Utah or, Chinese food. I don't know, but either way, does not read super well. Don't like that. And then even worse is we're already attacking Sanderson, right? His reputation and the fact, I don't understand why this reads as a negative, that he's excited to talk about anything. I mean, I've never been in this situation, but if I was to invite, or maybe I don't think Sanderson invited him. Maybe, I think that's clarified later. But If I was to be doing an interview with someone who works for a magazine who's going to be writing an article about me, yeah, I'm going to be really excited about everything because I want to maintain a good positive air, right? You don't just like reminisce about depressive memories. You keep it exciting, keep things happy, keep things moving on. It's weird. Um, how serious do we think this journalist is being, though? I think it's 100% serious, and the reason I think that is because, as far as I know, there hasn't been any response to the backlash. I think if it was supposed to be not serious, say this is a satire article, there would have been a statement. They probably would have apologized. They probably would have said this was, a bad joke. Sanderson has replied on a Kickstarter Reddit post, I believe. I read that earlier, and it's crazy. It's a lot of negative opinions there. I half wonder if this article was meant as satire for The Onion rather than Wired. I mean, if it was posted on The Onion, then yeah, but it wasn't. And I'm just shocked. No, the article wasn't deleted. I just don't want to give more clicks to the site. Someone posted this in a Discord I'm in, so I figured I'd use it. Show my support a little bit, even if it's nothing, right? It's just a link, one click, but still, sometimes you just gotta say fuck you to whoever, and this is one way of doing it. So yeah, I think he was trying to indicate it was cheap Americanized Chinese food. Maybe, and that's fine if he was, I guess, but like, you'll see it later. He just brings up the fact that they're in Utah a lot, and I wonder if that is part of the problem, is that he doesn't, I think the guy said earlier he's from California, maybe. I don't remember, but like, San Francisco. It says right here. So he sits across me, he being Brandon Sanderson. He sits across me from in an empty restaurant, kind of lordly and sure of his insights, in a graphic t-shirt and ill-fitting blazer, which he says he wears because it makes him look professorial. I can't even say that word. Professorial. It doesn't. He isn't. Unless the word means only believing everything you say is worth saying. Sanderson talks a lot, but almost none of it is usable, quotable. I begin to think, this is what I drove all the way from San Francisco to the suburbs of Salt Lake City in the freezing cold dead of winter for? For previously frozen dim sum and freeze-dried conversation, this must be why nobody writes about Brandon Sanderson. So recklessly, I say what's on my mind. I have to. His wife is there, his biggest fan, always his first reader, making polite comments. I don't care. Maybe nobody writes about you, I say to Sanderson, because you don't write very well. The world unfreezes. He agrees. What the hell else is he supposed to do there? He knows that you're going to be writing an article. You just insulted him. He has to agree, right? He can't say, actually, I'm like a great writer. You can't. How? That doesn't work. That's madness. That's ridiculous. What response was he looking for? I'm so baffled by that. You're a terrible writer. We got some in the chat right now, right? Mark Timoney and Andrew D. Meredith. You guys are terrible writers, right? How would you answer that? That's absurd. I mean, I would, as someone who usually tries to make jokes about things to, cope or whatever, and trying, you don't want to get into a blown out fight with someone who's going to be writing about you. Of course you're going to say, I agree. Crazy. I have no words, as you can see. I'm stumbling through this. And in front of his wife. I know. And again, up here it says this, I don't know if this is intentional, It says, so I recklessly say what's on my mind. I have to. His wife is there, his biggest fan, always his first reader, making polite comments. I don't care. That to me just sounds like an insult against his wife for no reason. Of course his wife is going to be his biggest fan and his first reader, and she's going to be making good comments. I don't care. What an asshole. Like, that blows me away. Is if this dude is sitting at a chair or at a table in a chair next to his wife talking about his writings, is she supposed to say, listen, you're a terrible writer and I hate every article you've written? Like, I just don't understand what the point of this line here is and why we have to bring her up. So weird. I don't know if you've read the article before or not, but just heads up, this article is extremely long. You should probably speed it up a little. I got all night. I don't care. I have read it before. I've only highlighted the stuff I really want to go over. And there's a lot in the beginning, and then I kind of skip a bunch. But yeah, it's nuts. Just what a class act, I say satirically. Yeah, really. It's crazy. What is the purpose of sending an interviewer obviously biased against the author? It's just for shock value, I imagine. So I said on Twitter that to me, as I read this, it really read to me because in the beginning he says a few things that really hint at this. The first is that he goes to Wired and gossips about it. And the second is that he had all these negative opinions about Sanderson before he even met him. And to me, it reads like, I don't like Sanderson, and I am going to write an article about why, and maybe I can meet him and prove why I don't like him. Was that the intention? I don't know. Does it read that way? Yeah, it really does. So let's continue. It's not that Brandon Sanderson can't write, except earlier he just said that he can't write. Just putting that out there. It's more that he can't not write. Graphomania is the name of the condition, the constant compulsion to get words out, down as much and as quickly as possible. The concept of a vacation confuses Sanderson, he once said, because for him, the perfect vacation is more time to write, vocation as vacation. His schedule is budgeted down to the minute, months out, to maximize the time he spends rather counter-ergonomically on the couch, typing away. Most days, he wakes up at 1 p.m., exercises, and writes for 4 hours. Break for the wife and kids, then he writes for 4 more. After that, he plays video games or whatever until 5 a.m. A powerful sleeping pill is all that works, finally, to get him and the voices in his head to shut up. Again, this reads so badly. It just sounds like he's... I don't know if Sanderson has ever said that he has graphomania, and I don't know if he told this guy that. If not, kind of rude to push that on someone. Because, yeah, while you could have a condition where this condition, graphomania, maybe he just really likes writing. That's not a condition. And maybe, he just likes to write a lot. I don't get it. It almost reads as though the journalist is jealous of Sanderson. I mean, it really does. It really does. And Andrews agrees with you. Yeah, it does. And there's I'll spoil it for anyone who hasn't read it already, but later on, something else I highlighted. He does mention that it took him 5 months to write this 4,000 word article. And it's right here. In the 5 months or so it is taking me to sit down and write this magazine story, which is 4,000 words long, Sanderson has published 2 books. During the COVID lockdowns, he wrote and or edited 7, 2 for his regular publisher, a graphic novel, and 4 more in secret, telling no one but his wife, until he surprise announced a Kickstarter in March 2022 to crowdfund their publication. Hence the $42 million raised in a month, by far the most successful Kickstarter ever. Now, he keeps bringing up the money raised from the Kickstarter, and I don't think he ever actually brings up the fact that he funded all other fantasy Kickstarters that were on at the time, which I kind of think is another way of making him seem, like greedy and one of the rich people that, does what he wants. But This does also, like Andrew said, reference jealousy in the fact that right here in the 5 months or so it's taken me to sit down and write the story, which is 4,000 words long, Sanderson published 2 books. He might not be jealous, and that's fair. But why are you highlighting it if you're not somewhat maybe jealous? I don't know. But I have to say, if it took you 5 months to write a 4,000 word story for a magazine and you're a journalist, the fuck are you doing? This is your job. Like, it's a long time to write 4,000 words. Now, admittedly, I don't know. He might have had a lot of other articles and stuff going. I have no idea. But if we're assuming that he didn't do anything else in this period other than write this article, which is a bad assumption, I agree, but it's possible, then that's crazy. Now, I do believe the person who wrote this is actually a senior editor of Wired. So it's possible he doesn't primarily write and mostly edit stuff, right? So that's entirely possible. And that's why it might have taken him 5 months. And if so, that makes sense. But 5 months to write a hit piece on someone, kind of gross. So it says most will hear this and think at that rate, none of the words could possibly be any good. They'd be right in a way, and that's what Sanderson agrees with. At the sentence level, he is no great gift to English prose. Again, why do you have to be a master prose person to be a good writer? I don't get that. And he again references Sanderson agreeing with him. But again, how is Sanderson not going to? You're not going to fight. You're not going to argue. He goes into the early books especially. My God, here's a sample sentence. It was going to be very bad this time. Another one. She felt a feeling of dread. There's a penchant for redundant description, and he goes on to describe stuff. But my thing here is the sample sentences aren't, in my opinion, examples of bad writing. It was going to be very bad this time. I bet you could find that or something very similar to that in any book written by a big prose heavy poetic author. That could just be a dialogue line, it could be the way to end a chapter. I don't know. It could be anything. And it's crazy. She felt a feeling of dread. Well, I have news for the guy reading this. That type of emotional style of writing where you just say how someone feels and not maybe display it is how almost every single book, like before 1980 was written, I think it's a much more modern take to show, don't tell. So highlighting that as a terrible piece of writing is almost kind of funny because if you think about it, he's probably criticizing all the books that he is thinking are really well written. But that's just a side note, I guess. All right. I wrote 5,000 words this weekend. Good job, dude. Where's my 5 months of pay from Wired? Really? Dear Lord. I wish I had graphomania. I mean, yeah, I binge work. So I'll write for like 3 or 4 months straight. And in those 3 or 4 months, I have noticed I can usually get a whole book written almost. And then I have to take like another 3 or 4 months off from writing. I binge relax. Usually in that time I have other stuff going on, like I'll be editing or doing other stuff for the writing still, but like I'm just not like writing because it's hard. And he chose from early books 15 years old. I know, right? Like everything about this article is so disingenuous. I can't take it. Of his own work, Sanderson has said, I detest rewriting. I write for endings, and I write to relax. It shows. He writes by one metric at a 6th grade reading level. Well, I have news for the guy that wrote this. Let's look it up. I'll check. Average American adult reading level. 7th to 8th grade. So he's writing at a 6th grade reading level, and the average reading level of an American adult is 7th to 8th grade. So all he's doing here is just making sure that everyone can read his book. And I don't think that's something you can insult someone over, personally. He detests rewriting. I'm right there with him. I fucking hate it. As soon as I write the first draft, I'm done. I'm not done, but I like to be done. And he writes for endings. I don't know why that is a negative, because to me that reads as I write and I have endings planned. And so the whole time he's writing, he knows what he's working towards. To me, that just says he plans his books out. Now, I'm not a plotter, I'm a pantser, but even I have my endings sort of figured out. And so I make some hints about them as I write. And I just find that to be strange. Why would that be a bad thing? I don't know. Lisa does life. Hey, oh, hello there, my friend. And Mark is a sadist. I love rewriting. Well, we all, planning is nothing to turn your nose up. I would never disparage anybody who plots. I would never disparage anyone who pantses. Or discovery writes, whatever you want to say. I don't understand why people care what processes other people use, and it's strange. Anyway, it says, here's where I'll stop using Sanderson's words written or spoken against him. I'm pretty sure that's a lie. It's not fair. He's simply not, I'll say it again, very quotable. I spent days with the man. I watched his YouTube videos, made a dent in his podcast empire, most of it, incredibly about writing. Like his books, it all blurs together. I typed some 40 pages of his notes for the story, and who knows how many pages of transcripts the AI spat out when I fed it the many hours of recorded audio. Now that I'm writing, I find I'm referring to none of it. Possibly this is the influence of Sanderson himself on me. Graphomaniacally get thoughts down. Have fun, write for the ending. So he's saying that Sanderson influenced him to actually think for himself and write. Good. So I will. This story has an ending, I promise, and I'm sprinting toward it as if to a vacation. Like the best of Sanderson's endings, my ending should surprise you, because you see, Sanderson actually did say one thing to me, one miraculous thing that stuck that I remember these 5 months later with perfect clarity. Just 7 words, but true ones. You're not ready for them just yet. You need more story first. Again, completely lambasting Sanderson. He only said one thing I remembered, and everything else was shit. What? Ridiculous. Can you imagine that? Oh my God. Everyone in the chat, you've all just stayed with me for multiple days, and I've just told all of you, you guys have said one thing that I remember word for word, and everything else, I don't care. All right, let's see. Honestly, fancy prose don't make the grade level go up. It's decorative frosting. I agree. I mean, I'm not a big prose guy myself. I do recognize some people do really like that. Obviously, a lot of people really like that, right? And that's cool. I have no problem about it. It's 12:30 a.m. here, but I'm awake, so I thought I'd come say hey. Well, hi. Hopefully, you get to sleep when you want to, I guess. There's nothing worse than laying in bed wanting to be asleep and not being asleep. I'm mostly a pantser, but I agree it's good to have some target to be aiming for. An ending without that is just aimless. Well, something I realized when I wrote my first book, The Trials of Ashmount, I pantsed the whole book, and it wasn't until about 3/4 of the way through it that I saw I kind of didn't really know where I was going with it. So at that moment, I figured out what my ending was going to be, and then I had to go back and kind of like edit the book to put in some foresight and some hints about what was happening. And now that I know that's how I kind of write, I do that naturally. I kind of go back and add things as I go if I change anything. I'm half pantser, half planner. I don't know why this is allowed. It's awful. The fact that so normally when you write an article, for a magazine, and I haven't done this, so I don't know. So I say normally like I know what I'm talking about, but I believe it works like this. You're contracted to write articles, or you bring article ideas to the person in charge. And so either you're assigned projects or you propose them and you are accepted. So then you get a deadline and you have to write your article. And once you have your article written, you turn it in, and then the editors go through it and force you to change it and maybe reject or accept different things, right? The problem here is that the guy that wrote this article is a senior editor. So I don't know if he has to approve it through anybody. So it's possible he just wrote it, said this is a bomb, and published it. And really, I don't know how it works. So maybe not. But if there is someone that actually read this and said, good job, that person's an idiot. He misquotes Hoyd. Daniel Green spotted that. It's highly suspect this guy read or did anything he says as he did as far as delving into Sanderson. Okay, so I did see the Daniel Green video, or most of it. And that is another reason why I thought I would do this myself, because I just wanted another video out there, really. More people talking about it is always good. So then we... this is talking about the Dragon Steel Convention. I don't want to talk too much about this, but this is just another funny thing I saw when I read the article. It says 10 seconds to go until the launch. The lights are flashing, the music thumping. This is sick, someone whispers behind me as a Cosmere's worth of nerds count down the remaining seconds. So now we're insulting the entire fan base. Why? Why? Now, a lot of these people would probably happily call themselves nerds. This was not friendly. We know this. As is typically the case at these things, there's a general air, warmish, body odored of unself-consciousness. We all know the stereotype of these people that go to conventions or Magic the Gathering tournaments or game stores. And while there are some people that maybe are not the most hygienic, all it takes is one person and the whole place smells bad. And I just feel like this is really just another dig at a community, right? Because like most people are not hygienically like neglectful, I feel like. And I just think that's another low blow, honestly. I think it's just another way to attack a whole community. One guy from Massachusetts tells me he just spent $170 on a rubber sword, not Nightblood. This one is called, I don't know how to say that, Myalarin as my guess. But I'm not a Sanderson expert, so I apologize if I butchered that. It's bigger than he is. He won't be able to take it on the plane home. So right here is another, it's a veiled insult because it's written like, oh yeah, look, these people are buying this stuff. But the second sentence here, it's bigger than he is. He won't be able to take it on the plane home. It's almost like just a fact. It's like an insult hidden as a fact. Like, why would you buy this if you can't even bring it home? But like, you don't have to bring it on the plane to get it home. No one's spending $170. And Daniel Green made this point in his video. No one is going to spend $170 on a sword and not bring it home. Like, it's crazy. I see this one really pissed me off. I see a young couple with very young kids. Are you indoctrinating them into this fantasy land? I asked, gesturing to the stroller. Trying to, the dad says. Indoctrinating? What? That's just, so now you know, just from him, he admits this. He said this line. He wrote this, and he's the one that said this. So he's not lying. He actually said this. Now, if you were to say this in jest, it's funny. I mean, I think it's funny, right? But this is not in jest. He actually believes the indoctrinating thing. And we go back to the beginning of the article where he brings up Mormonism. And I feel like this might have some sort of connection with the religion thing, Anyway, that part really pissed me off because it's the language used. You're using really negative language on purpose. And the next part is kind of a long discussion I have thoughts on, I think. So let me pull back to the comments here real quick. In my honest opinion, because he's trying to justify that Sanderson's success is because his fans are as bad as him. I hate this. I've been to cons in Utah. This is not how it is. Full disclosure, by the way, I've never been to any con, so I can't offer my opinion. And actually, I think I did offer my opinion on it, but it's based on, people in general, not actually being in cons. He's using a lot of generalizings about genre fans here. Yep. He's prejudiced. Honestly, the way that the article is written, it really feels that way. I think it's really gross and just disingenuous. And I think even when he's being honest, like when he talked about the Kickstarter is a really good example. He puts out a lot of facts that are true, but he also omits things. Like I might have missed it, but I don't think I did. He never said anything about Sanderson being an absolute champ and paying off every single fantasy writer's Kickstarter that was on there. Side note, just a really unfortunate thing that happened is that when this Kickstarter went live, I can't remember where I was at in my publishing journey, but and I can't remember exactly what year the Kickstarter happened, but I remember at that exact time, I was actually considering doing a Kickstarter for something to do with the Trials of Ashman. I can't remember if it was editing an audiobook or just publishing it in general. I don't remember the exact time. And I was like, no one's going to actually fund this because I'm an unknown entity. And then 2 days later, he funded all of them. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? It was so funny. This reporter is the culture and sci-fi and fantasy critic at Wired. What an elitist swine. He believes it's for true and literary. Wait, what? He is the reporter for sci-fi and fantasy critic, and he really... So what he probably has done is he sees a lot of the Sanderson hype, which we already know from this article. And perhaps he tried reading one book and was like, this is absolute trash. And now I'm going to get to the bottom of why. But to be fair, a lot of these critics that read for these magazines, if you ever look at their, these are the best fantasy books I've ever read. It's always books I've never even heard of. And I'm a huge fantasy fan. It's always like, I might be wrong because I'm really bad at judging knowing genres, but it's like literary fantasy or something. I don't know. They have the typical regular fiction covers. It doesn't look like a fantasy book at all, and they're called fantasy. It'll be 10 books, 10 best fantasy books, and then maybe Patrick Rothfuss will be on there, and then it's 9 books no one's ever heard of. It's also worth noting in Sanderson's reply on Reddit, the guy kept circling around to the religious angle. And when he doesn't get Sanderson to get intimate, he goes on to smear the religion anyway. Yeah, it's really quite disgusting. We'll get to that a little bit later. I think we return to that. So let's continue. The one question I ask practically everyone is, why Sanderson? I only need to ask it a few times to realize the answer is always the same. It's a two-parter. First part, Sanderson's characters. They feel like real people, everyone insists. The second answer to why Sanderson is his worlds. This is probably what he's best known for, world building as it's called. The good, then we move on. We're talking about the characters that Sanderson writes. The good ones, and most of them are good, are very good, inspiringly good. No one has sex. They only save lives. What nobody, not a single person complains about in my 2 days walking the palace floors is Sanderson's writing. This is all categorically false. Sanderson has plenty of terrible people in his books. Sanderson does not write about sex. Why does that matter? That's such a strange point. No one, you can write, there's so many authors that don't write about sex. I don't really write about sex. I don't, really want to. I mean, I have some sexual stuff in my books, and some might say I'm detailed and gross, but I feel like I don't really write detailed sex like a lot of authors. Uh, then he says that all his characters, they only save lives. That's not all they do. There's plenty that the characters are doing. A controversial take here. We'll talk about Kaladin from the Stormlight Archives. Very minor spoilers. I don't think that this is going to ruin any book for anybody. But in the first couple books, Kaladin is like trying to fight and survive, and then he finally, is able to get past a few things. And then we're struggling with PTSD and his mental health, and I hated that part in that journey. That's part of why I don't like the second two Stormlight Archive books. Is that we focus way too much on Kaladin's mental health, I think. Again, controversial opinion, maybe. A lot of people like that. I got kind of bored of it. But it's his right to write about. And so I just think that saying that all his good characters are only trying to save lives constantly is weird. And again, no one has sex. Who cares if no one has sex? I don't understand. Now, the next part here is hilariously written in bad faith. Nobody, not a single person complains about in my 2 days walking the palace floors is Sanderson's writing. All right, so let's just think about that for a minute. We're at a Brandon Sanderson convention. Who the fuck is walking around there saying he's terrible at writing? That's stupid. Secondly, even Brandon Sanderson's biggest fans, I've seen this myself in plenty of book groups and reviews. Tons, all of them, constantly say, while his writing might not be the best, I really love his story and characters. All the time. Sanderson is a bad writer. I've already said it. Yep. See, here's another point where we have to just point out that he's a terrible writer. It's just disgusting. Okay, let's jump back to comments for a minute, because the next part is when he actually goes to Sanderson's house, and that's when I probably rant the most. Anyway, let's see. I'm not quite sure what everyone's talking about in the comments at the moment. I'm pretty sure your first chapter had sex in it. Your first chapter, that is, or references to it. So yeah, that's true. Actually, I got a bad review on Amazon. It's a 2-star review, and it was actually written by someone I know who I know online, and she's an older lady in her 70s, I think, and she knew I was writing a book, and she asked me, "Oh, you're writing a book? Would I like it?" And I was like, "Well, it's like Joe Abercrombie. If you like Joe Abercrombie, then that's like the mature level." Because she was worried about the content. I was like, "Well, if you like Joe Abercrombie, then that's basically the content of the book. Like it's darker and whatever." And she's like, "Oh, he's like my favorite author." And she bought the book, read the first 2 chapters, DNF'd. She messaged me and said, "This is way too mature and adult." And I was like, "I thought you said Abercrombie was your favorite author." She looked it up. She messed up. It wasn't Abercrombie. It was some guy. I say some guy. That's insulting. I don't know the author. I've never read anything by the author. I believe he's a really big author, actually. I just don't know anything about him. Ben, I think his name is Ben Abramovich. I think he wrote something called The Rivers of London, which is a big book. That, like, I don't know if it's big. I mean that it's well known. And so I guess way different in terms of content. She's like, I don't want to, I'm not going to keep reading. I'm not going to review. And at that time I had like no reviews. I was like, "Hey, just write a review about why you DNF'd it." And she mentioned the nasty sex. I was like, okay, that's funny. But yes, the reporter is struggling so hard to make himself the protagonist here. Yeah, it's true. He's an urban fantasy writer. Okay, cool. That's probably one reason why I don't know him, because and again, If you like urban fantasy, that's fine. But I really dislike urban fantasy aside from Harry Potter. I do like Harry Potter, but um, a lot of urban fantasy I just really don't like. I think the reason why I can tolerate Harry Potter is because you have the real world, but the real world is so insignificant to the story. And whereas things like now I haven't read Dresden, but I know that Dresden takes place like in Chicago, and I really hate reading like constant references to like the real world when I'm reading a fantasy book for the most part. But that's who cares what I think. Let's continue. 3 days later, I pull up to Sanderson's built world, his home in a gated community of American Fork, Utah. All right, so I think we reference shower somewhere up here where he gets invited. I forgot to highlight it, but anyway, he's talking to a friend, and he mentions wanting to talk to him, and she gets in contact with one of Sanderson's staff members who ends up inviting him over, and that's how he heard about the shower. But anyway, also I just saw this on an accident when I was up here, and more insults. I didn't even highlight all the insults, and I thought I did, but there's more. It's just gross. Anyway, so talking about the shower, I already knew about the shower because a few nights earlier I'd gone out for drink. Oh, here we go. I'd gone out for drinks with a friend of Sanderson's I met at the con. After contextualizing Sanderson's success for me, basically he gives fans exactly what they want. She insisted I stay a night in the Elantris suite. And you have to try the shower, she said. I'll text him. The next morning I woke up to an invitation from his assistant. Now this part right here is weird. I didn't highlight it, but he just goes on to state facts about Sanderson's family, basically. People that are at the house. Sanderson's assistant being his wife's sister. This doesn't actually add anything to the article, and to me it just felt odd that we're just saying all these people around him is his family and friends, and like, isn't that what you would expect? I don't know. That's just weird. And then they mentioned the company Dragonsteel and how it's his extended family or whatever, and how there's this writer group that the writing group is actually relevant because that continues down here, but the rest of it seems strange. I just don't understand needing to mention all this stuff. Padding for the article, maybe. I don't know. I just don't. He went to Sanderson's house and then is surprised that there are friends and family there. I think that's just weird. Obviously, there's going to be friends and family at Sanderson's house. Maybe this guy grew up where every single family member had their own house. I don't know. The writers group still meets. The writers group still meet every Friday, which is what today happens to be. It's the most PG gathering of writer types I've ever been to. There's another veiled insult right there. There are chips and sodas. Someone's baked an apple crisp. Before the meeting kicks off, I corner some regulars in the kitchen. Oh my God. We're insulting the food, I think. A PG gathering. Well, Sanderson is known for writing clean fantasy. I assume he wants similar people around him. Then we're bringing up chips and sodas and apple crisps. I don't know why, because that's what you would have, like a gathering. People eat snacks and stuff. But this is so telling because he writes himself. Everything he writes, it's almost like he's at like a self-help meeting because he's always admitting the worst things. He says, before the meeting kicks off, I corner some regulars in the kitchen. Already he knows he's coming off hostilely, right? And then he attacks them again. They're gossiping, cracking jokes. One, Dragonsteel's new head of narrative lets slip that Sanderson feels no pain. Okay, pay attention to this no pain thing because this is actually really disgusting. It's true, Sanderson's sister-in-law says. Even though he writes for 8 hours a day on a couch, he has no backaches. The hottest of hot sauces cause scarcely a sweat. At the dentist, he refuses Novocaine for fillings. When I ask Sanderson later to confirm this, he does, but asks if I really have to print it. I'm sorry, I say, I really do. Why? What did any of this add to anything? This whole paragraph could have been deleted. he never had to bring it up. Now, I don't really know what the conversation was, and I don't really know if Sanderson is really, upset about him having to write that. I don't know, but I just don't. And we'll see. We're going to get back to this too. The writer's group is standard stuff. What's this character's motivation? Can the reader follow that fight sequence? Sanderson gives feedback with half his brain, the other half occupied with autographing books. Again, another insult because it doesn't take half a brain to sign your name once you've done it a million times. It's only afterward that the real talk happens, such as Star Wars debates. It's actually kind of funny that this author considers Star Wars debates being a real talk when he's disparaged the nerd community this entire time, and Star Wars is obviously that. It's just interesting that Star Wars is acceptable to talk about. But anyway, we'll get back to the pain here. When those subside, I bring up the pain thing again. He brings it up even after they ended the conversation and Sanderson didn't really want to talk about it. It continues. Turns out Sanderson doesn't seem to feel any kind of pain, even emotional. On roller coasters, he's dead-faced while his wife is shrieking. Shrieking is like a negative word, I feel like. Maybe those were her words. I don't know. There's so many people on roller coasters who don't scream, though. I don't scream on roller coasters. It's sick and wrong, she says, smiling. She likes to say she married an android. For his point, Sanderson actually, at this moment, looks pained. He might not feel, he says, but his characters do. They agonize and cry and rejoice and love. That's one of the reasons he writes, he says, to feel human. I like how the author even says he looks pained. Yeah, he probably looks pained because you're being an asshole and keep bringing up shit that he doesn't want to talk about. I go back to the Elantra suite where I finally take that shower. There are multiple shower heads. I turn everything on. Water hits me from every angle. I don't cry, but I could. I don't know if he means because the shower is so amazing, or maybe he's struggling with the guilt of being a dickhead. Sorry, I'm a little passionate about this guy being an asshole here because it gets really just terrible, I feel like. How dare he buy a nice home with his success instead of spread the love by financing other Kickstarters? Oh, wait. Exactly. Yeah, that's weird. Like, it's only his family and friends supporting him, no outside people. They literally tried to show him a good, clean time, and he's livid. Yeah, I know. I don't get it. His books have sex. I think the very first chapter of The Final Empire talks about rapes, and the second book has a thwarted naked woman coming on to the villain. He just doesn't describe in detail. Yeah, that's true. He is very much a fade to black / hint kind of guy. He still does mention sex, so it's strange that they said that he doesn't. I don't know if you saw it, but Brandon himself wrote a post on Reddit about this 2 hours ago. Yes, he did. And he, of course, took the high road and said we should not attack the author of this article. And he said that he was just trying to get the article out. And so he was meeting a deadline. If this is how he feels, that's fine. But he also did defend a lot of his, stuff. And you know what? My personal opinion on this, if someone can write an article lambasting someone like this, he is definitely open to being lambasted himself. So while I respect the idea that Sanderson doesn't want people attacking this author literally came at Brandon Sanderson with 2 automatics, 1 in each hand. And I just feel like if someone, shows up with a pistol to take a couple shots at this guy, it's not the end of the world. He's suggesting that Sanderson is a freak, or at least not normal. Yeah, he does that throughout this entire article, unfortunately. Brandon, ever the gentleman, agreed. Clearly orchestrated intent from inception to make a hit piece. Yeah, I said earlier that the whole thing reads like he had a super negative opinion of Brandon Sanderson, and then he wrote the article with the intention of proving why Brandon Sanderson is a terrible person. So let's continue with the physical meetup because this shit gets crazy. So he says, so he didn't cry when he was in the shower, but he could have. But now he says, I do cry the next night, my last in Utah. We're down in Sanderson's below-ground movie theater in plush red leather seats that not only recline but also have adjustable headrests. He wants to show the specs off, so he plays the opening scene of The Greatest Showman. I don't tell him that while I like musicals, I hate The Greatest Showman, and especially Hugh Jackman. The scene starts, the chair shakes with an otherworldly sound. When Lame Hugh opens his mouth to sing, I can't help it. I burst into tears. Wow. If a movie, okay, I hate a lot of movies. I hate every single musical. So I'm with him with not, I would not like this movie. I cannot imagine being in such a well-regarded author's home who's graciously hosting me and showing me around and showing me his movie theater, and then he puts on a movie I hate, bursting into tears in front of him. What? How psychotic. I feel like, I don't like to assume or push stuff on other people, and that can be really self-damaging, I feel like, when you try and claim someone has something. But this is not normal behavior, right? Like, what is wrong with this person? Like, a movie should not trigger you into tears because you hate an actor. That is weird. That's not normal, right? Like, if he said something happened in this movie that, triggered a memory that makes me sad, fine. He's crying because he hates Hugh Jackman. I just, that right there says enough about this person. I feel like that's just insane. Talk about a forced attempt at humanizing himself. I mean, yeah, maybe that's crazy to me. I seriously wonder what's going to come of this for this guy. How did he think this article would go over well? Best case, it seems like he's trying too hard to be edgy. Might come back to bite him. I have no idea, dude. It's just nuts. Maybe he cried because he knew he was planning to betray Sanderson. I mean, really, I just can't imagine going through all this and not having. I just don't have any words for that. It's crazy. If Sanderson is God, does that make this guy Judas? That's a good question. Maybe the crying is hyperbole. Who knows? I can't trust anything this guy says. Also, it's just a pretty decent movie. One of my daughter's favorites. I love watching it with her and singing along. Sounds like this guy needs to find enjoyment in his life. Yeah, I don't know anything. I've never heard of this movie, so I didn't even know Hugh Jackman did a musical. So let's continue. What's happening to me? This story isn't coming together. To my mind, I still haven't gotten anything real from Sanderson, anything true. What? He thinks that Sanderson's just sitting there like lying? I don't understand. I'm not the first person he has toured around his lair to politely gawk at his treasures and trophies and his hallway of custom stained glass renditions of his favorite books. Tolkien, Harry Potter, the Belgariad. I'm certainly not the first person he has told about one favorite book in particular, Barbara Hamley's Dragon's Bane, which an English teacher put in his hands when he was 14, probably the day he became a fantasy writer, or how he first got published, or about the phone call he got from Robert Jordan's widow asking if he might finish the Wheel of Time series. These stories are all over the internet, on his website, and many others. Sanderson has lived so much of his life and fame openly, self-promotionally. It's a major reason for his success. I find it very ironic here that the author of this article goes into all the things that make Sanderson so well known and so famous. When the very beginning of the article, he says, "Why isn't Sanderson famous?" It's just weird. I don't think it'll come back to bite him at all. It's generated talk and clicks for the Wired. It won't affect him at all. Yeah, it's hard to say. Unless there's enough backlash that something happens, I wouldn't be surprised if he's forced to issue an apology or something. I don't know. It's hard to say. Not going to lie, I cry every time I watched Greatest Showman, but that's me, and not because I'm planning on betraying Sanderson. Okay, so the movie itself is emotional, because I don't know anything about it. But it sounds like to me the guy cried 100% because Hugh Jackman was on the screen, and that's just weird. There won't be a backlash except from Sanderson fans, and he's already told them not to attack the writer. Yeah, but here's the thing about that. The most famous people in the world will tell people not to attack the other person, and a lot of them don't listen to that. I mean, come on, everyone has 5 stories they tell over and over. Yep. And you see how that's going, indeed. Hey, Phil. Greatest Showman is the greatest. This must be a more well-known movie than I realized because I have never heard of it. But that's not really a surprise because I'm not a big movie buff, and so I really don't go to the theater. Uh, it's about overcoming and rising from nothing to something despite what the world tells you. Right or life, am I right? Okay, fair enough. Ironically, that's why I actually like the movie Ratatouille a lot. Uh, Everyone on Twitter is attacking the guy. I know, and honestly, I think he deserves it. All right, so continuing. After I recover from Hugh in 4D, Sanderson collects his 15-year-old, and we all drive to dinner. This time the food is better, Utah Japanese. Sanderson and I order ramen. He salts his, then I watch his son salt his. I'm gonna fuck this up. Yakisoba. I don't know. I could cry again. Why? What are you crying about here? Instead, I asked Sanderson if he's ever so moved by a scene. He writes that he cries. Sometimes, he says, though it might not be the scenes people expect. This author has this weird obsession with crying. I could cry. What are you crying about? That you're eating Japanese food? Or that you're like still hanging out with Sanderson after having all these terrible thoughts? I don't know. It's very weird. All right. Everyone on tech? Yep. Okay. Everyone who reads fantasy? Yes. If you said these things about the Islamic religion, Jewish religion, or even about the behaviors of or practices of LGBTQ, or really most any religion or groups, this guy would be fired and canceled. That's probably true. However, I do strongly oppose. Well, here's the thing. This is an article written for a magazine that was published. So because it's part of his work, I guess he could be fired for it, but the company approved it, so I don't think he should be fired for it unless it was his decision that maybe his boss disagreed with, I guess. Overall, I'm a strong proponent of not firing and canceling people overall. I just don't like the practice myself, but exactly. I said earlier today, the reporter needs to read a book written by a French rat. Maybe you're not meant to salt that food. Maybe. I mean, I thought it was when I was reading this and I saw that. Who was it? Sanderson? Where was that? Yeah, Sanderson salts the ramen. When I read that, I was like, oh, God, why? Ramen is already so salty. But to each their own, right? Yakisoba. Okay. I think I almost had it. Thanks, Phil. I've seen people bash Sanderson for his religious beliefs, but this guy seems hellbent on attacking him for being a genuine nice guy. Like, what's the point? I don't get it. I don't either. And honestly, I don't think you should bash anyone for their religious beliefs for the most part. Ramen is already very salty, so that's maybe why I made a comment about that. It seems the whole article is to impress his writer friends by bashing someone who doesn't meet his criteria. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I think too. And, if the whole article wasn't talking about crying, the crying comment would actually be really funny. Let me be clear. I don't agree with firing people. I'm just saying the general public of the current world would fire and cancel them. Yeah, I know. I agree. And I didn't actually think that you were like endorsing that. But I did think it was important I brought up because I just think that we're in this weird reactionary world on social media where, one person does one thing wrong and then everything crashes down about them. And we're always way too hasty. Like, this is a side note real quick, but the creator of Rick and Morty was accused of was it sexual assault or was it just assault? I don't know exactly what happened, but he was accused of doing something, got fired and canceled everywhere, and then the lawsuit was dismissed. Now, I will never, ever, 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 ever say that you shouldn't listen to the victim, but I will say that when it comes to things like Johnny Depp was another one, that you should just, be careful, maybe wait a little bit, see how things land before we react to them. That's all I would say on that matter. But let's return to the article because this stuff gets fiery. So he just saw the movie. Didn't cry, but we're talking about crying with Sanderson. So Sanderson won't say more, but it's something. This conversation from 5 months ago, remember, I recall fairly clearly. This is a lie. Or this might not be a lie, but what he said earlier was a lie. He says, this conversation from 5 months ago, remember, I recall fairly clearly. We just had a couple paragraphs ago about how everything Sanderson says is basically forgetful and stupid and boring, and he didn't remember anything except for, was it 5 words? It might have been 7. I don't remember, but he specifically put a number out of words that he said he remembered. And now he's saying he can remember a whole conversation. So this guy is just going back and forth. We're heading towards something now, some kind of admission. I can feel it. Oh, now we're getting into the religion bashing. When Mormons ask God for a sign, they speak of a burning in the bosom. Say you're a kid wondering if you should be a fantasy writer when you grow up. You might ask God what he thinks. If there's a burning in your bosom, that's probably a yes. So I press Sanderson on the moments he has felt the burning. He says they're too intimate, too special to talk about. That's fine. Then let's talk about Mormonism in another way. Let's talk about it as it relates to fantasy, because it's no secret Mormonism is the fantasy of religion. What? The science fiction edition of Christianity, I've heard it called, with its angels and alternative histories, embodied gods, visions, and plates made of gold. I asked Sanderson if I've got the ultimate promise of the religion right. The ultimate promise being, as I understand it, that we humans will, if we're good and marry well and memorize the passcodes, eventually pass into the highest kingdom and come into our divine inheritance. We'll become gods, in other words, and get our own planets. I don't know much about Mormonism, so I can't tell how insulting this is, but it has to be pretty fucking insulting, right? The science fiction edition of Christianity. Listen, I'm an atheist. Personally, I think all religions are science fiction. That's just my opinion. I would never insult anyone for believing anything. I would never diminish someone's beliefs, and I would never say that your belief is wrong. My opinion is just what I believe based on what I grew up, and I would never try and sell anyone on that opinion, and I would never try and push it on anyone. But to call someone's religion the science fiction edition of another religion, calling it science fiction to begin with, insulting. To call it science fiction of a proposed better religion, I think is the hint here, or maybe not the real religion. Just terrible. I can't imagine saying that to someone's face. So you're Mormon. That's just science fiction of the better religion, Christianity, right? What? He continues. Sanderson doesn't balk at the characterization. He agrees that's the gist, and he knows where I'm going. He agrees because what the fuck else is he going to do? He can't say, no, that's fucking offensive, you douchebag, because this guy's going to be writing an article. So he's just going to try and agree and move past it, like everyone would. It's ridiculous, the fact that he's writing this stuff. He doesn't balk at it because he knows it's right. What? He knows what I want to know. Oh, sorry. He knows I want to know if what he's doing, writing fantasy books, is fundamentally, in some way, some very central way Mormon. Of course it is, he says. The world building, the gods incarnate, the systems of magic. So much of Mormonism is about rules. So are his books, where miracles don't happen unless you put in the work. So that's Sanderson replying the only way I think he probably could give him an answer to relate it to Mormonism, so this guy shuts the fuck up because he's just saying some terribly insulting things here. That's when, between mouthfuls of pork cutlet, Sanderson makes the connection between his work and the work of his Heavenly Father explicit. This is when he speaks the 7 words of truth, the only ones I'm certain he has never said in quite this way ever before. As I build books, Sanderson says, as I sit there for once entirely enraptured, God builds people. Okay. So I don't understand all the religion bashing. It's just gross. I don't think we should be bashing people for all sorts of things, to be clear, but I get why opposing groups do go after each other. But who's going to get mad that Sanderson is nice? Okay, you brought something up that's very important. I agree. We shouldn't be bashing people for a lot of things. And I also agree opposing groups do go after each other. Nowhere in this article, as far as I know, has the author actually stated what they are. And if they did, I missed it. But my assumption is that with the way they're talking about this religion and Christianity, they're either an atheist who has a much more negative view of Mormonism than they do of Christianity, or they're Christian. That's just a guess. But that's what it feels like, because my God, do they bash Mormonism. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I think Mormons in general are an interesting people. A lot of the times they have some interesting beliefs, and I think a lot of it is strange. But I would never, ever attack someone on that. The most I would do is ask serious questions about it. Now, I know some Mormons near where I live who, they seem very different than the Brandon Sanderson type of Mormon, because this group of Mormons are very close knit, very secluded, very, I think they're homeschooled. It's more of a cultish type feeling environment where they're grown up. I believe they don't associate with anyone who's not a Mormon. So it's very I don't know, narrow, I guess. Brandon Sanderson, obviously not that way. And I don't know much about Mormonism, so talking about it is hard. I just know I just know a small amount about it. So I don't like to talk too much about it. The couple Mormons that I've had experiences with were some very awkward ones, but I think, it could have been just the people. It could have been that sect of religion. I don't know. I don't care, honestly. If they're happy, do what makes you happy, right? Believe what you want. I think that's the important part. Good point, John. So basically, this guy is so desperate to bash Sanderson that he relies on hyperbole to bolster his arguments and then turns his back on it 2 paragraphs later. The whole article keeps going in a circle where he'll say one thing and then 2 paragraphs later contradicts it, and it doesn't make any sense. Is he trying to be insulting because those 7 words are actually pretty solid? To me, this whole thing harkens to people bashing Twilight. I've always defended Twilight because it's intended for its audience the same way Sanderson is intended for his audience. I fucking hate Twilight. The movies, I've never read the books. I was in the room when a movie was played. I wasn't actively watching it, and I could not stop laughing at it. But it's clearly not for me. And I think that people who go around bashing people for liking it are assholes. Because why? People can like Twilight. It's not the end of the world. Do I disagree very heavily with how vampires are done in it? Yes, very much so. But again, it's not for me. I would argue that anything including vampires probably is not for me. Speaking from experience, I do not think he's Christian who bashes Mormonism. He might be an ex-Mormon or ex-Christian. I mean, that's fair. My experience with religion is very, very limited. And so, I fully admit that I probably just insulted someone out there. And if I did, I apologize. It wasn't my intent. I really am very ignorant when it comes to Mormonism. Admission. That word makes it obvious he was searching for dirt and something negative to write about. Honestly, this is their own admission. Yeah, exactly. This article reads like me writing a paper at 4 a.m. and reaching for a point. But he def has baggage. Yeah, I agree. All of this. All right. So now we get to the theme park. After dinner, it's time for Evermore, the rundown theme park. Again, I really wonder. I don't know the theme park, so I don't actually know if it's run down or not. But I feel like every time this author talks about the location that he's at, because it's not in California and because it's in Utah in the middle of nowhere, I just feel like every time he's just insulting this out of the, out in the middle of nowhere place. I don't know. Maybe it's not even out in the middle of nowhere. I don't know Utah, but it just feels like he's insulting the place every single time. John, you're good. Well, that's good. I mean, my experiences with religion is that I think Christianity was the one that most people I knew, and then I have some experiences with Jews as well. And then when I went to college, I did know what was he? Muslim. I think he's Muslim. I don't remember. But I've never actually been, to my knowledge, I've never been close with any Mormons out there. And if I was, they never talked about it. So I didn't really learn too much about it. So I, again, don't know much about Mormonism, and I don't want to insult Mormons out there. But anyway. Oh, whoops. This is a very even-handed commentary tonight. I've been to Evermore. Oh, you've been to Evermore. I'll get back to these other comments. I want to continue this, though. It is not run down. It's a money sink for someone rich building a playground for fantasy. See, that's what I fucking mean. I didn't think it was run down just by the way it's written. It's ridiculous to say that then. That's nuts. It's not run down. It's being built up and feels run down because it's constantly being worked on. Okay. Got to run. Thanks for the discussion. Bye, Mark. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for hanging out. Really appreciate it. It's been fun. I do notice that the author is going out of his way to insult everything, like he's determined to be sour about all of it for no reason. That's the biggest thing that dismisses his opinion to me. I know. What? Why? There's no reason to insult this place. It's just like, it just feels like I don't like this. I'm going to pretend I'm the editor right now, or the writer of the article. I hate Sanderson. I really want to write an article about Sanderson and why people like him too much and why they shouldn't like him. So I'm going to go down to where he lives, which is probably a shithole, and I'm going to see everything around him. And I hate everything about it. So let's go down there with a terrible attitude. Let's go to his con where all the idiots are that like his stupid franchise. And then I go down there and I see all these things with the biases I arrived with. And then I prove these biases with stupidly false facts that I'm verifying because I went there looking for them. And then while I'm there, I'm just going to insult everything I see because everything's terrible that touches Sanderson. And that's just like how this feels. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I just think it's gross. So inside Evermore, the rundown theme park, he gets recognized by everybody. I guess that's inevitable when you go to a fantasy land with a fantasy legend who has literally just purchased a $5 million plot of land across the way for who knows what world building reasons. Again, that's another dig at him, I feel like. He's a grown-ass man. He has the money. Let him buy his land. I don't understand why we care. We go into this whole thing where he and his the editor and Sanderson's son keep a silent tally about how many fans walk over. Okay, cool, whatever. This is something I didn't highlight that I should have. Sanderson shines in these situations. He's your god, but he's your friend too. It's another like religion thing. I don't think this is necessarily meant to relate to. Well, I mean, it probably was, but in this context, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what his intention here is. Is he relating it back to Mormonism, or is he talking about him being a god in fantasy? But it's hard for me to think that he's talking about Sanderson being a god in fantasy when the whole point of the article was written because Sanderson's not as famous as he should be, even though throughout the article he proves that not to be the case. It's just weird. And then right here, Sanderson is bigger than ever. A good writer, who knows? Sanderson is bigger than ever, but all up here, why? What makes less sense is why there's a hole the size of Utah where the man's literary reputation should be. What? And then again, somewhere around here, he talks about how, why isn't he famous? Just the whole thing is insane. It's so ridiculous. As I drive us back to the house, drop off the kids, and then stay in the car with Sanderson a bit longer, talking about life, talking about worlds, my ending takes shape. The surprise is that it was Sanderson's ending all along, the ending of his best books. A character becomes a god, and the god beholds his planet below. If Sanderson is a writer, that is all he's doing. He is living his fantasy of godhead on Earth. What? Like, I just don't understand all of this. Why? It's just, I don't know. I feel like this is also insulting for no reason. Even here, when we're talking about Sanderson in the park and the walk around, it says Sanderson's also unafraid to drop hints about future projects. He does this to me at certain points. Will they ever make a big movie version of one of your books? I ask him in the fairy garden. Sanderson makes meaningful noises. Even though your systems of magic seem unfilmably complex, more meaningful noises. Everything's been optioned, he says, but then things revert and discussions continue. Even that, to me, reads like an insult. Oh, he just makes noises. What I want to know is, how does this author know that Sanderson's systems of magic are unfilmably complex, but then it seems very obvious he hasn't read the books. Maybe he has read some of the books. I don't know, but it just doesn't feel like it. I'm so mad. It's just so, I don't know. There's something about it that gets under my skin because I can't imagine someone staying in my house for days pretending to be my friend. Now, someone mentioned earlier that Sanderson made a response on Reddit. Now, I have read this response, and Sanderson in the response mentions how I think he mentioned something about how this guy was like the friendliest person that was there for a professional reason. He said it felt way more friendly. Usually when someone's there in a professional capacity, that person and him, there's like this strange tension between them, and they can never like conquer that because it's like for a professional thing, right? And I think that's normal. But this guy was able to like really make this a friendly visit and really get it, and that just to me is very psychotic. I don't know. I just can't even get over that. Having someone infiltrate your house, learn as much gross things as he could, publish them all. Even if Sanderson didn't want him to, we're going to talk about how he doesn't feel pain, which I don't know why Sanderson wouldn't want that published because it's fucking cool. But you know what? It's such a weird detail that Sanderson, why do we need to publish it? If he doesn't want it published, it shouldn't have to be. All right, comments. I can't remember if I went here. It reminds me some of when I was in university and was writing splatter horror fiction, and all of my classmates thought I was trash because I wasn't writing literary fiction. Yeah, well, that's the true thing about educated people, is they often think that if it's not literary fiction, it's trash, which is a stupid take. It's like he wants to insult it because he's associated with his visit to Sanderson, so the author extends by insinuation that Sanderson/Mormons taint everything. I agree. And so I think that because he has this really negative opinion of Sanderson, he has this really negative opinion of Mormons, the theme park he's there with Sanderson, so I think that he hates it from that, and then he's not in California anymore, so we're gonna hate on Utah and their terrible food as well. I don't know. Honestly, it reminds me of how some people obsess and hate someone so much that they see negative in literally anything they do. They may not even be aware of their bias, but people around them can see it. So we see that a lot in politics, right? I'm not saying this is what I am, but I'm just saying as an example, I am a hardcore Republican, or I am a hardcore Democrat. So everything the opposition says and does, I'm going to hate and attack because of who they are, not because of what they did. And you see that all the time. So with Bill Clinton, he had the affair, and Republicans wanted him impeached. In my opinion, has been and still remains, what he does in his personal sex life is up to him. Let him do whatever. And then similarly, you had the Democrats have an absolute meltdown over Trump saying in jest behind the scenes with a guy that he's friendly with about, grabbing a girl by, and they flipped out over that and hated that. And I mean, if that situation is a little hard to go on, because then that he kind of did some a few bad things, but that sole incident, I think he's just joking around with a friend, and then it kind of got leaked, and I think that we kind of went a little hard on that. But again, it's just the whole opposing politic things, and now for some reason the opposition of politics has really bled into media that we all consume. So instead of just going at the politicians, now we're doing it with all celebrities and any opinion they have, and it's gotten a bit much, I think. I don't know what else to say on that. The whole thing makes me sad because Sanderson seems like a legit nice person who's trying to treat his guests with hospitality and was completely shit on. Yeah, and it's even worse because the guy was an asshole while he was there too. I'm not offended. I'm a member of the Mormon Church. We prefer to be identified by our real name, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but no one gets mad or bothered by the nickname. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because I really didn't mean to come off as offensive. If I did, I just don't know much about it. And since the article is all about, well, not all about, but has a lot of Mormonism, is it? It's hard not to talk about it. Missed that part of the article. I was too mad by then. That excites me. If he's building a sando land, good for him. I mean, that would be an expensive ass project if he was building a Sanderson land thing, right? But it is right across from another theme park. So what else are you going to want that land for? I don't know. Who wants property across from a theme park? That sounds like a nightmare. Maybe he's going to buy Evermore and then buy the land across from it and try and make it into one big thing. I don't know. This is why we edit our first drafts. I agree. And since this is the senior editor, maybe no one else looked at it. I don't know. Now, I will say, as someone that thinks this article is disgusting, when I read it, I didn't notice any actual editing issues, and that almost suggests to me that it was edited. But yeah, so I don't know. This Jason Key guy, not a fan of what you wrote here. I'm curious. Let me open his. Oh, okay. I was trying to see the articles written by this guy. Oh, I know why it's not working, because I'm on a archived version. Duh. Well, anyway, I'm curious. Man, I don't want to give them more clicks, but I really want to see what other articles this guy's written. Oh my God. So remember when we were talking about how it took him 5 months to write the article, and I was suggesting maybe he was doing other work, maybe he was doing other writings. He wasn't writing anything other than this. The last article he wrote before Brandon Sanderson is Your God was from August 24th. The biggest threat to humanity, black goo. I have no idea what that is and what they're talking about. But it's about sci-fi shows like Westworld and Severance. I don't know. This looks like perhaps a hit piece on sci-fi shows. I'm not quite sure, and I'm not going to read it. It's a very long article as well. But what else do we have here? He ranks the Star Wars movies. Nobody knows how to watch movies anymore. The real reason the Matrix Resurrection's bombed. I don't know. Nothing on here. Oh, here's one about an actual person. Is Becky Chambers the ultimate hope for science fiction? Her gentle, heartwarming stories seek to soothe our troubled souls. They also aim to blow up the entire genre. And I just got a pop-up asking me to sign in or pay for this, and now I can't read much anything else. I see one paragraph. Let's just read the one paragraph. See if it starts out bad. If you have problems, ask yourself one question. Do I drink enough tea? In the history of human civilization, boiling plants and water has probably helped more people get through their days than just about any other ritual or non-toxic consumable. Tea is a social salve, a private therapy, and the drink of choice for the clearest-headed among us. From mothers to mountain monks, for reasons less scientific than simply understood by all, tea slows existence, calms it considerably down. What the hell does that have to do with Becky Chambers? Not that I know her writings, but that's weird. Okay. Anyway, if you were to go back and look at other articles written by that guy, from what I saw, and I only saw a little bit, based on the titles and then the subheader of the Becky Chambers one, you would not get the idea that he was going to write this nasty long piece about Brandon Sanderson from the 2 seconds of work that I did. So maybe you could, but from what I saw, didn't look like it. Editing the first draft, not after writing that paper at 4 a.m. when it's due at 8. Yeah. Supposedly he read 17 to 20 books. That's 4 million words read. Wait, are you talking about the author of this article? Because that would be wild if he read 17 to 20 books of an author he thought was a terrible writer. It's a class act response in reference to Brandon Sanderson's response, I'm guessing. I agree. Too much of a class act response, I think. But then again, I think you also have to weigh up the power levels of these people. You have let's face it, a very unknown, non-famous editor of admittedly a pretty big place, but like his name is not recognizable. At least I don't think people would know who Jason Key is. I think, a lot of people know what Wired is, but so then you have Brandon Sanderson, who's like one of the most well-known modern fantasy writers. Kind of looks really bad if he goes after the guy, I think. John Wednesday, Def had no one check their work. Yeah, I don't know. Questioning things and being cynical are important. Just yesterday, Sanderson said in his podcast he is 55% spiritual, 45% cynical. I mean, that's good. I think that you really get into problematic areas when people are 100% spiritual and just go with whatever is preached to them, right? Because that makes you really gullible. And I just think that the people who are 100% in on these things often get stuck in just, well, this person said this, so it's like that's it. And I think that the best minds are cynical. The best minds think about things, even things they believe. Right? You can still think about it and come up with other ideas and thoughts. Wonder if this guy just hates speculative fiction and thinks himself so far above it all that he loves to crap all over it to stroke his own ego. I don't know. I just can't. It's one thing to write this and never have met the guy. And like that would be gross by itself, right? But to go to his house, meet the guy, and then put in jabs about things that happened when he met him in person. That's like really gross. Yes, he states he read 17 to 20 books. But why? Okay. So, hot take. A lot of you guys watching this already know I don't like Tolkien. I really can't stand his writing. I didn't even finish the first book. So this guy clearly hates Sanderson's writing. Clearly hates it. Why did you keep reading that? I mean, at some level, you have to like it, right? You don't read 17 to 20 books and hate it. That'd be crazy. Let's also take into account not responding is a solid setup legal situations. Yeah, I mean, you do have to be careful with your responses because of legal stuff, right? We've seen that. Again, I don't like to bring up politics because I'm someone who likes to kind of hide my opinions on things so that I don't like to alienate fans and readers. I like to have people from everywhere. I'm more interested in creating, like, for this YouTube channel, I don't care what your opinions are as long as you're respectful. And I would like to think that if we have differing political opinions, we can still be friends. And that's also how I feel about like selling my book. And that's why I try and keep a lot of my opinions quiet. But since we're 2 hours almost into this live stream, I think I can maybe touch upon it without too much backlash. And that's when we're talking about responses and legality. Think about the ramifications that Donald Trump has had when he makes public statements without thinking about it. I mean, some people will say that the election was stolen, and factually, that's just not the case. But we can stir up a lot of issues without thinking about it and cause a lot of issues. And I think that is a serious problem and something to be concerned about. And if Sanderson came out hard, he has so many fans, just like Trump, he has so many fans that someone could do something crazy or, stupid, right? We've seen things happen before. And so I think that when you're as big as Sanderson or Trump, or anyone that has a huge platform, you have to really be measured with your words and know what you're doing, because there's always going to be a crazy person somewhere, a gross person somewhere. And these people have millions of fans. I mean, we see this with companies all the time. You'll see like someone get fired at a video game studio, and video game studios aren't like super big, right? The biggest ones have a few thousand people working for them, and they're a sexual predator or something, and then everyone wants to like lambast the whole company, and it's like, but they didn't know, right? I mean, not in all cases, obviously. Think about Blizzard, yes. So, but when you're talking about people on a grand scale here, there's always going to be, Disney hires a lot of people. They're going to hire some gross people. Brandon Sanderson has a lot of fans. He's going to have some really gross fans. And that's just what happens when you become a lot more well-known, or when you include a lot more people. You're always going to have a fraction of gross or like insane people who will do really, really, really like not good things because they support whoever's talking. So if Brandon Sanderson came out and was like, this was disgusting, I can't believe that this Jason dude would do this, I brought him into my home and he betrayed me, and I was nothing but nice to him, and now I have this, and wow, I can't believe, someone out there would probably feel just as betrayed and maybe go after this guy. So like I Sanderson's response is great, and you do have to be very, very careful about how you respond, because I mean this with no joke, no humor, and lives can be at stake, right? Like we've seen it before where people try and go after someone, and that, that's not cool. That's actually really not, that's terrible. Seriously wonder if by read 70 to 20 books, he flipped through them, read a little here and there, and decided it was beneath him, the sort of thing you can do in 5 minutes per book. Me too. That one statement, as lack of understanding, is the number one fact that might make this whole thing arguably satire, bad and unsuccessful satire. Listen, if it was satire, I'd still have a serious problem with it because it's really gross. If it was labeled as satire, I would not be making this video. I'll say that. Jokes are subjective, and some people might find it funny. I personally wouldn't. This goes back into the whole Chris Rock and Will Smith thing, where it's just a joke. You should not result in physical violence. But even as someone who saw the joke and thought the joke was stupid and didn't find it funny, I still side with Chris Rock because the intention was to make people laugh. If the intention of this article was to make people laugh, but you knew that going in, if it said this article is satire, I would not care. I mean, I would still say this is like really bad jokes and not funny and stupid, because there's a lot of humor out there that is stupid or bad or insulting, but I don't get upset by it because at the beginning they say, listen, this is for jokes, and it might not resonate with you because humor, again, is subjective. Nowhere in this article does it hint at being satire. So we can't say that it, yeah, and I know that you guys aren't saying it's satire, but we can't even try and rationalize it that way because there's no hint at that. This website's not known for doing satire, as far as I know. There's no tag on it that says satire. There's no warning or disclaimer that says this is jokes. And because of that, I think you have to take it at like serious value. And so I do. And I think it's just grossly offensive. Most of the points he makes, the author, aren't necessarily bad points. It's just the way he writes it, and this like, he just makes it so personal and attacks Sanderson personally so many times. And the worst part is he doesn't even realize every single scenario he brings up where he's trying to dunk on Sanderson, and he does dunk on Sanderson, he actually makes himself look so much worse because he himself phrases it in a really creepy way. when he's in the kitchen talking to Sanderson's family, he even says, I forgot. I want to get the quote right, but he like, can I find the kitchen? Oh shit, I'm typing on the wrong. I corner some regulars in the kitchen. Like, what? Why would you use that word? I corner? Like, that's not good. Like, every time he does anything, he he admits that he's doing something just terrible. When they're talking about Sanderson feeling pain and how Sanderson didn't want to uh, bring it up, he even admits he's the one that brings it back up. He tells Sanderson and writes in the article, "Oh, I'm going to publish it anyway." Like, he does not do any favors for himself here. It's just weird. All right, where are we here? Right here. Right, it's either bad satire or an edgelord hit piece. Satire makes more sense, but I doubt that's the case. Edgelord, absolutely. I agree, John. All right, perfect. Yeah, I just, we're 2 hours now. I think I've made my point. If anyone wants to talk about anything else, go ahead, shoot comments. But for the most part, I think I'm done with the article. I think I've gone hard enough. I don't think anyone should directly attack the author of the article. I just want to make that clear too. Jason, everyone's going to write an article that doesn't resonate. Everyone's going to make mistakes. But you can't attack someone like this and then not expect some sort of response from someone. And so I made this because I had to talk about it. I couldn't do it in a tweet on Twitter. I just wanted to go through it, talk about a lot of the things that were not vibing with me. And after I watched Daniel Green's video, I just really wanted to even more. So instead of actually recording a video today, which was my original plan, I streamed this, and I just had to. Thanks for the entertainment tonight, John. Well put. Thanks, Andrew. I don't feel like I'm a very articulate person a lot of the time when I'm doing things like this. So hopefully I got my points out. I was clear and not too controversial or insulting. And I tried to be fair without, I know that I'm biased here because I'm totally against the author of the article. But I just, it just didn't sit well with me. And I just wanted to talk about it. And I'm still just repulsed that this got published. And I don't have any more words to say on that. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming here. I super appreciate the fact that everyone showed up when they did and joined me with a bunch of comments, and it's been fun. So I appreciate it. Everyone have a fantastic day or night. And hey, hopefully I'll see some more of you on some other streams and stuff. That would be great. Being biased against an author who is biased against an author bias. Yes, exactly. I think it's fair. I think I should be able to be biased against him because of that. But anyway, everyone have a spectacular night. Thanks for showing up. If you're not already, please subscribe. And hopefully I see you again on another stream sometime. Thank you so much, everyone.